Thank you for joining us today. Today's presentation is on strategies to maintain academic integrity for supporting learning at home. The facilitators today are 6 teachers with the Alberta Distance Learning Centre, so we have years of experience with remote learning. Today we're going to share with you the knowledge we've gained throughout these years and the goal that we all have, which is to produce better students and better citizens. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have some thoughts on how you, at a distance, can maintain academic integrity. So I'm the first presenter. I am Karla Montgomery. I started my teaching career in 1993 at Lauren Jenkin High School in Barrhead, Alberta. And after teaching for 13 years, I took an extended maternity leave to stay at home with my children. You may have seen one of them if you saw the promotion video for this presentation. My son helped me make that video. While I was at home, I had the opportunity to work with Alberta Distance Learning Centre as a marker, a developer, and a substitute teacher. Then in 2014, I had the opportunity to start working full-time as a chemistry and junior high science teacher. And for the last 2 years, I've been the science department head. What I'm going to be focusing on is strategic design and delivery. I was going to call this maybe building a better mousetrap, but then it kind of seems like we're trying to trap or trick students, and that's not our goal. Our goal isn't to trap them or trick them, it's to make them aware of what academic dishonesty is and help them build the tools so that they don't fall into the trap of undergoing academic dishonesty. So I'm trying to stop it before it even starts. So the analogy of a mousetrap actually would have went in well with this quote from Spencer Johnson, who is an American physician and author who is well known for his series The Value Tales, and then also Who Moved My Cheese. So the little story he has there about the mice would have fit in with the mousetrap analogy. But his quote that I really like says that integrity is telling myself the truth. So integrity is telling myself the truth. And that's what we're trying to get to the students to understand, is that you're going to be harming your education when you undergo academic dishonesty. So integrity is telling myself the truth, and honesty is telling the truth to other people. The goal we have is for students to have that intrinsic integrity. But we have to always remember that the adolescent brain is still developing. They're still struggling with problem solving and decision making, so we need to be kind to them. And we can do that, and we can help them by setting up our students for success, by developing better assessments that are going to lead them down the right path to begin with. So in the beginning, when I was first started with ADLC, I was a marker. And so I would see answers from the students, and you'd see a well laid out, well answered question. You'd say, spot on, you've got all the marks for this one. You'd see another assignment answer that some of the notation isn't great, but they've got the gist of it, and they understand, and it's a pretty good answer. Sometimes you would see answers that had the answer key right in it. So down at the bottom here, that would be teacher notes for how to grade the question. What is it doing in a student response? Where did they get that answer from? And then you'd also start seeing an answer. Well, it's not quite the notation that you would use as a teacher. And then there's some errors in it. There's an error down here, for example. And then you would mark another assignment, and it would be exactly the same. And you'd be thinking, what's going on here? And again, the answers would just keep coming back over and over again. All you would need to do would be to Google the question, and there you'd find this solution on a place such as Yahoo Answers. So instead of asking their teacher for help, students went to the internet. They Googled it. And we are a Google society. If you're sitting around with your friends and there's a debate, you look up the answer. People pull their phone out. What is the answer? I'm going to look it up. So our students see that behavior modeled all the time. But what we need to teach them is that you don't have to just go to the internet and look for answers. Sometimes you need to struggle academically to try to figure out the answer, because you're going to learn it and you're going to understand it. You're going to have problem solving skills, and it's going to make you a better student. And that's what we want. So in order to change the student behavior, we need to have better assessments. So why do students engage in academic dishonesty? It could be that they don't understand. They might not understand the concept, or they might not understand how the question is worded. You may, as an educator, write your question down and you think it's clear, but the student is coming from a different perspective and it's not clear to them. The students may engage in academic dishonesty because they want a higher mark. They're trying to get into nursing or engineering, and they need to have 90, 95, 96. And so they really want to make sure they have the right answers so they have the best mark. Sometimes it's just easier. It's easy to Google an answer instead of trying to solve it for yourself. Some students want to write down what you want to hear. That's their concern. They want to write down what's the right answer. They don't want to write down or try to show what they know. They want to write down the right answer. And sometimes we need just to have that conversation with the student so that they can reflect and understand, why are you in this course? Is it just to get that mark and get out? Or are you trying to build skill? Are you trying to learn some foundational knowledge that you'll need as you move through your academic career? So ideally, as an educator, we want them to want to have that academic integrity, but it needs to start with how we design and deliver our courses, and then how we interact with the students if they are being academically dishonest. So what I've noticed is that the design of the assessment can affect the academic integrity of your students. Now, I know it's not easy to redesign assessments, but to quote Fred Jones, pay me now or pay me later. So you may put in the work now to recreate assessments that are going to create a more authentic learning experience for your students and discourage academic dishonesty and encourage independent thought. We want to make sure that we're testing the student's understanding and the student's competency in those outcomes. So there's different tools that you can use to design an assessment that's going to give a little bit more independent thought, or give the opportunity for more independent thought from your students. So some LMSs have banks of questions. So in here, the students aren't just all blocked into having just one question, the same question over and over again. There can be random blocks. Another tool is that you can have randomized variables. So here's a question, and one student will get 343 milliliters, but the next student, when the quiz is created for them, they have 257 milliliters. So it's the same concept, same type of question, but each student's going to have a unique learning opportunity that they can then demonstrate their understanding, and they're going to have to do the work. They can't just Google that answer. So not everyone is going to have an LMS that has that capability. So mail merge is how you would put the addresses on and print out all those address labels so that you can mail out your Christmas letters, if anybody still does Christmas letters, or that you have the unique heading. So each person's going to get a personalized Christmas letter that says, "Hello, Aunt Mary, Merry Christmas, Uncle Bob." Just by taking your database and merging it with your Word document. So that concept is what's being used here to generate unique assessments for your whole class. So you have variables in the Word document, and then that's linked to your spreadsheet where you're going to merge those. So you have your different variables, the values, and there's even a tab there where you can do the calculations automatically, so you have all the answers generated for you. You merge those two files together, and then you get version after version, where each student has a unique set of values that they're working with. And how this helps is that maybe they're going to work with their friend on how to do it, but they at least have to type the question into their own calculator and make those own learning displayed for you by having unique questions that they're working with. Metacognition is another great one where students aren't just writing down the steps. They now have to explain why they're doing those steps. How are you going to get them to deliver that information to you? You could use something like Flipgrid. So the students are going to record themselves going over the question, explaining step by step. So I'm using this equation. The reason I'm using this is I'm finding moles and I need to use the molar mass. So you're asking them to demonstrate their understanding. And by them talking through it and explaining the steps in a video, it's going to display to you a deeper understanding and a more authentic understanding than if they just had to write out the answers, which they could have gotten from another source. And another strategy is going to be real-time assessments. And so then the concern is, how can you do real-time assessments at a distance? It's easy when you're in the same classroom. I'm going to hand out the assignments for everybody. I'm going to watch you like a hawk to make sure you're all doing your own work. But at a distance, how can you do that? So there's different ways that we can have delivery. One is delaying it. So strategically deliver the assessment at different times. So if you know that you've got a couple of buddies who always work together, but it's not an equal partnership, you know that one's going to be doing the heavy lifting, perhaps that student is going to be getting his delivery later in the day. So your first group of students going to be working on the assessment, a couple of questions, be done it in the morning, submit it. There's a timeline. And then your afternoon students will get those delayed assessments and then they can work on it. Scaffolding. Not every student needs to answer the exact same question. So maybe you have students who are struggling with the concepts. Maybe you need to give them the option, let them choose to have a more scaffolded assessment that gives more of the steps, more of the equations, more help and hints. Obviously, you couldn't evaluate them the same as if they did not have that scaffolding, but as long as you're upfront with the student and let them know, here's a Google form, fill it in. Here's a sample. If you pick scaffolded assessments, this is the type of scaffolding you're going to see for the question. It's going to maybe lay out your steps 1 to 5 as a reminder of what you need to do. Maybe I'm always going to give you the first equation for you. Maybe I'm going to give you the conversion factors that I usually don't. So you can use that scaffolding, but again, you can't evaluate a student with this scaffolding at a 90 and someone who did not get the scaffolding at a 90 as well. So you'll have to be upfront and you may say, if you choose scaffolding, out of 5 marks, you can only, maximum is get 3. And for some students, that's okay. You're going to give me some help. I'm going to take that help. And I'm okay getting 67 or 70% or 80 as my max on that. Some of your higher end students, you can have different questions for them. Maybe you would rather have them design a question. Design a question, provide an answer key on this concept. Maybe have your stronger students doing higher order thinking questions. So there's lots of ways that you can differentiate the learning for your students to help all of them be successful. Monitoring, again, it's easier when you're in a classroom, they're all in front of you, but you can also strategically observe students. So if you know you've got a couple of pairs that do a little bit too much sharing, you can strategically put them in different groups or the same group and have them monitored. And you wouldn't always do the same students. You would flip it around when you're monitoring which students. That way you can get a sampling of their work under monitored conditions, and then you'd also have some of their work when it's not monitored. Now everybody's concerned, but that's not fair if they have different assignments. I always tell my students and my kids, don't use the F word. We don't talk about it being fair. Fair, equal, equitable, equality, equity, these are not synonyms. I also like to say to my students, if they have a concern about someone else's learning, is I let them know, we're not talking about another student, we're talking about you and your learning. That's what we're talking about. So I'm giving you an opportunity to let me help you with your learning, and one way is scaffolding. Some of the groundwork can be done as a student declaration. So it could be either at the beginning of a course, it could be at each assessment level. And I have one from the University of Manitoba. I like the layout and design of it because it was on one page. There were some, when I was doing some research, I'd find some that would go page after page after page. So at the university level, this is good. It's not too much reading. There's enough there. They're writing their name, the assessment. For every assessment, they're going to be handing this in. Maybe a full page like this isn't conducive to the high school level. So it could be an online quiz, an academic integrity quiz. So in this course, at the beginning of it, we have, and usually this is paginated, you wouldn't see all of this all at once. It would go question by question, but just to make it smoother for this, I've put it all on one page. So a blurb about ADLC's academic integrity policy, a blurb about our work sharing policy, and then some questions. Like, have you read these policies? Could the student lie and say yes when they haven't? Absolutely. But we now have it in writing. Asking them how to work through the course. A lot of times students don't understand when and where they can get help. As soon as they have an assessment in front of them, they think it's all independent, but it doesn't have to be. Working with tutors. How much is too much work with tutors? And then also giving scenarios of what would be academic dishonesty and what would be academic honesty. And finally, a pledge. A pledge at the beginning of the course. I pledge I will not give or receive any unauthorized help on any assessments. And I'm going to do my own work. And they type in their name. Instead of just clicking yes, they type in their name. Gives it a little more weight, gives it a little more meaning to the student. Do this once at the beginning of the course. Again, as they're working through each assessment, just one question at the end, where it says, I declare that this assignment is wholly the product of my own work. Just a reminder, just a simple yes or no that they need to click. Again, some students may copy away, click no, and have no qualms about it. But the one thing I have learned is that there are a lot of darn good kids out there who are really putting in the effort, really doing the work. And this is just a gentle reminder to some of those who are struggling with some of the concepts and questions. It's just a reminder that you should be answering your own questions. You can always ask your teacher and get help. So one thing I noticed is that I did a complete refresh of my course, and I thought, I wonder how this is going to go over, because there were so many students who had been copying answers off the internet that had been there posted. And what I found out was that kids are pretty good. There was lots of smart cookies in the course who were doing their work, asking me for help, writing out great answers, and not just using the internet or another source to find the answers.
Hola, bonjour. I'm Patrick and I teach French and Spanish, and prior to arriving here a number of years ago, I taught languages to students of most ages and levels in face-to-face settings and in 4 different provinces after I earned my B.Ed in linguistics from Université Laval. I also taught for a year as part of a teacher exchange at a Swiss-German school. Some aspects of distance learning that I really appreciate are that each student can have a flexible daily schedule in their education, they can make more global decisions about their education, and they can simply access one-to-one help from teachers during the school day. Also, they can progress at their own pace. I'd like to start my presentation with a bit of a story. This student is a story about a student called Tina. Tina phoned me like every day in early July. She was in grade 12 French, back when I first started here. She was an avid learner, but seemed to learn slowly. I thought this because she asked the same questions on Wednesday that she had asked me on Tuesday. I tried to remain professional, but that wasn't easy. Partway through that month, I went on summer vacation and my colleague took over. I returned to the office in mid-August and my colleague asked me, "Do you remember Tina?" Yeah, I do. "Did you know she was in a wheelchair?" "No, I had no idea." "Did you know she has MS?" "No, I had no idea about that either." So I was so glad I'd stayed professional. My second thought was, what other schooling could she have chosen and not been immediately labeled as, "She's the girl in the wheelchair," or "She's the student with MS"? Now, education at a distance has many drawbacks for sure, but many advantages too. I read of a Swiss student years ago who suffered from leukemia, and the only way she could attend school with her classmates was via video conference. This is to say that there are also significant advantages to distance ed. We teach rural, urban, homeschoolers, athletes, members of traveling choirs, young mums, and many others who, at different times in their academic careers, need the flexibility of online learning. Now, some aspects of this presentation will also apply in language arts and to speakers of other languages. Where do you want students to end up when they complete the course with you? Much of the preventative maintenance, just like in construction of a building, is done when you build the foundation of your course. So, supply them with a blueprint to that final product, or a roadmap to get to that destination. I will present 3 main tips that stand out, as well as comment on online translators. If a student's achievement goes from, say, 60% up to 99%, ask questions. To notice this, you need to keep your finger on the pulse, verify their previous marks. I tend to write down in my notes on each student what aspect of that language was causing that individual some grief. Most students struggle with the vowel sounds in French, let's say, so I might mention that. And if they suddenly master vowels like nobody's business overnight, then I ask questions. It also helps tremendously to mark all the students' say Unit 3 assessment prior to returning the whole bunch of assignments to the rightful owners. The sudden skyrocketed improvement might involve some irregular practices, or it might just mean they did their homework. Either way, it's worth asking questions. As a teacher, ask questions to verify the student is getting the concept. Ask her, how do you say, "What time is it?" in French? Or what is another word for automobile in Spanish? For more advanced levels, ask a couple of questions in the target language. Quel temps fait-il? ¿Cuántas personas hay en la foto? So to those questions, the student could respond with a one-word answer, which would tell you how well they understood the question, or there might be a long pause, which means they could struggle with understanding the question or just not know how to word it in their proper response. And thirdly, they might answer in a full sentence. When there is a group of students working from the same school, I say to them, by all means, work together and think for yourself. We don't want all the wrong answers identical, with even the accents going all the wrong way. As the farmer says, straws show which way the wind blows. I also tell them, have patience with yourself. Some students skim read the first unit or two and say, I don't know any of the vocab. I'm going to fail this course. I quit. Okay, first of all, think back. Ask them the question. How long has it taken you to become this fluent in your mother tongue? To which they'll likely answer their approximate age, 15 years. So, how reasonable would it be to suggest that you should be fluent in 2 months or even 5 months? Secondly, if you already knew all the answers, you would not need to be in this course. So, have patience with yourself. And do the practice exercises, which help teach you the vocab and the grammar concepts you will need down the road. Online translators are like a GPS. When we use it constantly, we become lost without it. And sometimes it takes us places we do not want to go, like onto the beach and into the lake. Electronic translators have improved over the years. They are amazing tools to use at times, and can be used on occasion to translate effectively 1 or 2 words at a time. But be careful, overuse of AI can reduce HI, if you know what I mean. I just had a student yesterday who I talked with on the phone, and they had a question in front of them that was, they were supposed to unscramble, well, the words were scrambled and they were supposed to put them in a sentence in a proper order. However, they had a synonym to one of the words that was in the list of scrambled words, which tipped me off that something sideways was going on that the student was not actually understanding. She was probably typing into the Translate program and just entered in what the computer spit back to her. On that note, I encourage editors, whoever is proofreading, to just highlight what went sideways, and please don't write in all the answers. That's the student's job. Now, what might use of a computer translator look like? Here's 2 columns. One of them is a beginner level and maybe at a 60% with 4 major errors. And the other one, it looks like a university level paragraph to me, or a start of a paragraph. And you'll notice if the skill level rised dramatically for one student from column 1 to column 2, then you need to really ask questions. Or if the student is inexplicably mastering the 4 marks activities without doing the practice activities, that is also a warning sign. If you see something is off, like the first chapter of Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, where the Greek statue is just too perfect, you need to ask questions there. And note, a lot of students think that using Google Translate is the normal way to handle a situation. And as teachers, we need to keep in mind this may be the first time that an adult has called them on it. Remember, learning a language is a bit like an exercise program. 25 minutes per day is much better than 3 hours crammed in on a Saturday morning. And when it starts to hurt, do you quit the exercise? Do I become dishonest? Or do we persevere? Now back to these two columns. The first one being very beginner, and the second one is at a university level. I would even suggest you could add a middle column to indicate common errors that Anglophones make. If this third type of instance occurs on an individual student's assignment from time to time, these are what I call academically honest mistakes, because they show that the student is thinking for herself, and therefore is often only a matter of time before the student has mastered the concepts. For example, if the student is saying je suis fin or je suis 17 ans, that's a simple word-for-word translation. Online translators tend to help students bypass a lot of systematic beginner errors and effectively eliminate prime learning opportunities. You see, a lot of students think that the goal is to get the right answer at all costs, whereas from our experience, we know that the more important process is to learn. Speaking of prime learning opportunities, when do those happen? Often they happen when we make mistakes. I'm reminded of a student who was going to help out at a kids club on October 31st. And she asked some friends, Est-ce que tout le monde va, what's the word to dress up? S'habiller, that's it. At which all the other friends in her entourage laughed so hard they could hardly contain themselves. What had the student done? She'd actually said, will everyone be wearing clothes instead of dress up? The word she was looking for was to wear disguises. Question, Mr. Teacher, is it cheating if I know someone who's Hispanic or Francophone and have regular conversations with them? La réponse, non, it is not cheating. This is fine. I encourage you to take every opportunity available to learn the language and enhance your cultural understanding. Remember, work together, think for yourself. So, 3 things to remember. If there's overnight amazing improvement, ask questions. And when in groups, do work together and think for yourself. And also have patience, realizing how long it has taken for you to become fluent in your mother tongue. And also remember, Mr. Teacher says, do the practice activities first.
Next is Heather Senger, who has been with ADLC for 2 years now. She currently teaches Grade 2 LA Personalized Learning Grades 4 to 6, which is ADLC's answer to inclusive education. For the past 10 years, she has been a homeschool support teacher, otherwise known as a facilitator, and homeschooling parent herself for 8 of those years. Her primary career focus has been working with parents to ensure their children's learning. Prior to having her own children, she worked in alternative programs in Edmonton, the Cocoto program, and Calgary, Foundations for the Future Charter Academy. In both circumstances, the relationship between school and home was paramount for student achievement. So something that's so important to keep in mind is that right now everybody's feeling really overwhelmed. As a homeschool facilitator, I had the unique opportunity of sitting down at the kitchen table with parents who had chosen to home educate their children. And they would share with you their worries and their concerns and their vulnerabilities. And these guys chose this path. Parents who you are dealing with right now did not choose to home educate their children. They don't feel like that's their place. And so the first thing about ensuring integrity in learning at home is building relationships with the parents who are going to be there to support their child. You as the teacher need to be supporting, guiding, praising, affirming, validating those parents. You need them to be your partner in working towards success for their student. You're going to be teaching your parents as much as you're teaching the students at the lower levels, because the child does not have the ability to clearly tell their parent what it was their teacher said. So you need to be letting that parent know what's on your mind and how you want to approach it, and the best way to go about whatever activity or strategy you're trying to implement, so that they can be helping you when you are not there to provide the instruction yourself. A big part of, again, that integrity in home learning has to do with relationship building. There needs to be a sense of trust and a sense that you guys are playing towards the same goal. You are not some outside character coming to look and to judge and, and to be afraid of. And then, so as a homeschooling parent myself, I started out as a teacher, and then I stopped being a teacher and became a parent. And then when my daughter was 6, I became a teacher and a parent. And it was quite a transformation. So it's really important, and I know that many of you who right now have children at home and are trying to work as well have experienced this, but you can't take the classroom and just say, oh, because we're not doing group work, it can just be done in the home. The home is not the classroom, and learning doesn't work the same at home. There's a different dynamic between parents and children than there is between children and teachers, and that means that there's a lot of adapting and kind of adjusting as necessary as you go. So I'll share a little anecdote. My 6-year-old, very eager to please daughter, we're sitting down at the table, and I've come up with this activity that I think is just going to be great, something similar to what I would have done in a classroom. And she looks at me and she's like, why would I do this? It's so important to know that what a teacher can do with a kid is very different than what a parent can do with a kid, because a child is going to say, Mom or Dad, I don't see the point in this. I don't see the value in this. They hold you much more accountable to authentic experiences that they see, as being relevant. So in order to build this relationship, you as the teacher need to be ready to hear these things from your families. That I tried to have Johnny do this and it was just a disaster. If you're ready to hear, and you can be aware that perhaps some of the things that you're sending home are not going to be successful, and then you can respond to it and provide alternative ideas, alternative approaches, you're going to see some success come out of that. When a family says we're having troubles and you respond with good adaptations, you're building that trust. Then you know you've really succeeded when you have students and parents begin to collaborate with you. So by pumping up the parents and giving them the confidence to perhaps make some changes on the fly, and you respond to their questions, concerns, and troubles with good ideas as alternative approaches, what's going to happen is that the parents will start to share with you their own creative ideas about how, they did an adjustment or something that they think that it might help you. So, like we tried to do this science activity, it didn't go very well. And so we found this video that I think all the kids would like. That sort of back and forth is the collaboration that you're moving towards, having built a relationship of trust. Now, how do you build this relationship? It's through staying connected. With my grade 2 students, I would see them typically every 6 school days. My preference is doing video conferencing because then we can see each other. It's just a much more, it's an easier way to build relationship because you can see facial expressions, you can see hand gestures, and as a teacher, it shows really what their learning environment is like. You'll hear if there's a dog barking the whole time, if there's siblings yelling and screaming at each other in the background, if they have a quiet place where they can do what they need to do. And this allows you the empathy to, hear the student or parent concerns, come back to you and, respond as necessary. But those video conferences also give you a really powerful tool to model to the parent how you want to be teaching the child. It gives you an opportunity to model how to correct, a kid's mistake, how to guide them when they're having troubles. The expectation should always be especially at lower levels, that the parent is at least in earshot for the entire Google Hangout, because you want to be modeling the tips and techniques for that parent to kind of hear, how things are going. Because you'll have full ends of the spectrum. You'll have a kid that's a disaster and the parent thinks it's doing great. And so you want the parent to hear you explain how to improve or how to do better. And on the flip side, if a kid is actually really doing well, but they have a really critical parent, you want to commend that child who's doing well and let that parent know that they don't have to be, highly worried, and how to affirm and praise the student. So video conferences would always be my first pick. As the kids get older, you can spread them out a little bit, but I would say you want to have a one-on-one chat with your student at least once every 2 weeks. Then before you say goodbye to the student, you should be asking to talk with mom or dad, their supporting parent, or in this case, it might be an older cousin, it might be an older sibling, but you want to make connections with that person who's there to be helping the child and say, how are you? Do you have any questions? And you'll be surprised, I almost never say goodbye at that point. There's almost always a question, a concern, just a request for kind of give me a pat on the back because I'm worried that I'm not doing the right thing. So those are really powerful moments to build relationship. If technology is just not a choice, the phone does work. I have a few Hutterite Colony students, and I do my best to connect with those children and their parents. Usually what we do is the telephone will be put on speakerphone, and then, mom can kind of add in, we can talk. That's the second best. And then email is important, but email should only be a summarizing tool or a coordinating tool. If you have meaningful conversations that need to be had, they should be done over a video chat or over the telephone first, and then you can send an email to summarize or paraphrase whatever it was. And I think that's all I had to say for now. So if there's any questions, feel free.
Hello. Being a history teacher, I have to ask, where was the first French fry ever cooked? Well, it was cooked in Greece, of course. Welcome to this online teaching world. It is a interesting, fun, difficult at times, scary beast. So let me ask you, what are you afraid of now as you become an online teacher? My fears? I'm glad you asked. One fear I have is that I do not know the different computer programmer systems that well, and that I won't be able to help students navigate through it. My second fear is that I would not be able to help my students learn this way. After all, I have heard some teachers say that face-to-face is the better. I've even heard a few teachers say that face-to-face is the best way to teach. But wait a minute. Stop and think. If that was actually true, then why would we give a student a book to read? Watch a movie or documentary? Even answer questions from the textbook? you get the idea. Thanks for that, Patrick. A big fear that I had when I started teaching online is that I would let my students in schools down. I would fail them. For a long time, I honestly believed and almost convinced myself that I could not be a good enough online school teacher. But then I started to see that my students were actually learning, even with all of my mistakes and blunders. But they were coming along. I was educating my students through teaching them online. I finally started to understand the saying, fear is just false evidence appearing real. And please let me take a moment to tell you that you are an educated professional. You have always been able to start and do new things. And this is just one more new thing that teachers need to learn how to do. So please, do not let the online teaching world scare you or stop you from continuing to being the best teacher in your students' lives. You can educate and help change their life, even with all of the fears and mistakes you might make along the way. It's okay to be a little scared, as long as you don't let it stop you. Maybe he should get part marks for being honest. How many of you have ever gotten a speeding ticket? I've gotten many. Some because I was in a hurry, and others because I was just not paying attention to my speed. If I would have had either of these things ahead of time, I would never got any tickets. This is why I have chosen to inform my students that there are many different ways to check for plagiarism, and that I will be checking every assignment. We as teachers also need to help them to define it and make it easy for them. Plagiarism, trying to make it simple, is stealing. You're stealing someone else's work, then lying by making others, including myself, think that it's your work. Sometimes the easiest and best way to keep and gain academic integrity is to have a deterrent. If the students know that if the students know that you're checking, then they're less likely to try it. But some of them still will. So this is why at ADLC we use a program called Turnitin, and it does cost money. It's one of the best ones out there, according to the tech department that have used different ones and tried different ones. And there are hundreds of other programs that you can purchase and do the same thing. This program works very well. Everything in the light pinkish color has been taken from someone else. My students here have the answering question on the chart I provided, and it picks up the words. So these are the questions that and you can see these are their answers. So it even picks up the questions that I give them as plagiarism. And then if you look also closely down the bottom left, that's my question, and over here is where they plagiarize. So you can see all the plagiarism. And then you look at these little numbers here, and when you click on these, it will actually tell me exactly where they got it. And so with this program, you can print off a PDF form showing all these things. And so it really freaks some of my students out when I can show them exactly where they got the information from. One of the little drawbacks is sometimes this program does not work on all PDFs and other programs, but does not happen that much. It has trouble catching plagiarism if there's a lot of spelling mistakes in it, and I know that some of my students do that on purpose just to throw me off. Another program I use, and which you can do, is have your students work in Google Docs or Slides. Then you as a teacher, you need to install the add-on called DraftBack. When the student completes the assignment in Google Docs, they hand it in, and for the first time, you just simply click on the crooked arrow, and then it'll come up. Then second, you click on DraftBack, and then this pops up and it says View. It will start to show you word by word in fast forward. You can slow it down in real time, letter by letter, word by word. If a student has 300 or 300 sentences appear at once, then you know they simply cut and paste. They plagiarized it. Another interesting one is this Originality Reports, and it's an add-on as part of Google Classroom. It's one of the nice things is that it does connect if you're already using Classroom. And I know you're not supposed to read from sides, but this is interesting. This feature is designed to help students avoid accidental plagiarism. Accidental. Seems like Google owns everything except my students. And I have to confess that I've not used this a lot yet. I'm a bit more familiar with the other two, so I've used those more, but I'm starting to use this one more, and I really like it. According to Wes, yes, that's me. I just wanted to see if you're still paying attention. The best feature on this so far, when using it in connection with Google Classrooms, and it'll even send out a letter to the students. Okay, and it tells them how to use it and what to do. And a student can actually hand in their assignment, and it will check them and show them where they've already plagiarized before they hand it in to you. So students already know what they need to fix, and then when they hand it in to the teacher, it'll double check it again. Some of you might be new to the online teaching world. Teachers are always learning. And I want to remind and encourage you to hang in there, and try to have some fun with it. As teachers, we know to fake it until we make it. And please remember that ADLC teachers are always ready and willing to help you. And I just want to leave you with one more old adage that I've chosen to try to live by and teach by. And I've reworded this a bit, but it says, students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Students plagiarize basically for two reasons. Scared of failing, being judged by that failure, and they actually think they might be able to get away from it, so they're lazy and it's the easy way to do it. So please remind your students, call them on it, be honest with them. With all the fake news, with all of the Facebook and Instagram and other social media platforms, no one's telling them the truth. So your kids are strong and they can handle the truth, and it's refreshing for them to see the truth. So speak the truth and show them the truth. Show them that you care enough to tell them to stop cheating.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm still fairly new to teaching in a formal setting. I graduated university in 2018, and I've taught under a temporary contract with Edmonton Public as a junior high, senior high math teacher before joining ADLC. Many of the skills I've developed are a direct result of growing up the son of a 30-plus year Division I teacher at a small rural school, whom I credit with teaching me a lot of the techniques I use on a daily basis. The skills I've developed during my years as a private music instructor and tutor have had a significant impact towards my approach to supporting students at ADLC, where creating personalized lessons and forging relationships with students is key for generating student success.
Hi there, my name is Marquessa Heaton. I graduated from the University of Lethbridge in 2016. 3 years ago, I found one of my passions teaching in an online setting, as I find that it provides that opportunity to help and work with students on a one-on-one basis. I've been the ADLC Senior High Math Department head for 2 years now, and I thoroughly enjoy mentoring new teachers to ADLC into this online world.
So today I'd like to share some of my experiences with you. Although I'm new to ADLC this year, I am certainly not new to helping my students achieve the goals they set for themselves. I'm going to talk about plagiarism in mathematics and some of the approaches I've used to address it with students over the course of this year. I would like to give credit to Marquessa Heaton, the math department head here at ADLC, whose guidance and willingness to share personal experiences has allowed me to develop an approach to managing plagiarism incidences that I believe can be readily adapted for any distance-based high school course. I found this quote particularly well suited for my portion of this presentation. The mention of math seems to instill fear in many students and can cause detrimental anxiety in some situations. In order to help students manage this anxiety, it's important to try and forge relationships with students from the minute they begin your course. Think of the book, Give a Moose a Muffin, He's Going to Want Some Jam. If they are hesitant to talk to you, it will mean they will be hesitant to ask questions when they have trouble. And if they are hesitant to ask questions, it means that they may not be sure how to approach a math question. And if they're not sure how to approach a math question, it is likely going to create anxiety about the blank spot on their assignment page. That, much like Lady Macbeth in homage to high school English, they just want to be rid of. It is a requirement for ADLC math assignments that all questions be attempted, or else an assignment will be deemed incomplete and will not be graded. This means students are driven to try to fill in any blank responses so that they continue to move through their course. I currently teach Math 10C at ADLC, but I've taught and tutored mathematics from Math 7 to Math 31. I don't like to generalize, but I'm more than willing to bet my ed degree that other teachers know from experience that students tend to run into difficulty answering mathematics questions involving explanations and extended thinking. From my own educational career, I came face to face with this in the ring theory and abstract algebra courses in university. Procedural fluency is great, but it won't do you any good for courses and content focused solely on theory. If a student's response looks too good or uses words and concepts or calculations that are not found in my course's content, I type the question into Google to see what pops up. I've found that commonly plagiarized sources are typically within the first 6 or 7 hits on Google and come from common help forums such as Brainly, Yahoo Answers, or MathStack Exchange. At the start of the year, Course Hero was a prevalent problem as students can share their entire marked assignment in order to get answers to other assignments. However, Marquessa has been especially diligent with requesting that Course Hero remove ADLC assignments from their content whenever an issue pops up. We typically do not use the same programs for math assignments as other courses, such as Turnitin, which you can use for social and English, just because most of our assignments are handwritten and not typed. This means that detecting plagiarism is a manual endeavor and can take up a lot of your time if you search every single hit on Google every single time you think a student has plagiarized. As the Math 10C assignments are standardized across our different sections of the course at ADLC, the other instructors and I have created a Google Doc repository where we store links and screenshots of the top Google hits for each assignment question. This makes it fairly quick to identify potential sources of plagiarized student work and lets us share anything we've found so that everyone is aware of potential issues. It also helps to have a good memory for sources you've seen online, which makes it a lot easier to remember and identify problems in submitted student work. There are plenty of times where I know that a student has consulted an online forum for help with their response, but they've changed it enough that I cannot definitively prove that they've plagiarized. You need to weigh the benefit and drawback of addressing this issue with students each time you come across it and ask yourself some questions. Can you prove where it came from? Depending on the student, will it create even more problems in terms of anxiety and disengagement? Is it worthy of a first or second incident, or should you just address your concerns in a warning? Not addressing an incident of plagiarism on an assignment is not the end of the world. Students will still need to apply their understanding to similar questions on quizzes and exams, which means that there will always be future opportunities to address the negative consequences to their understanding of the concepts at a later date. Here's an example of an explanation type question from a Unit 1 measurement assignment in our ADLC Math 10 course. This question is a frequent one where I catch students plagiarizing as they do not know how to explain the differences between SI and imperial measurement systems. A perfect answer here is that the SI system is a base 10 measurement system, while the imperial system is based on a different scale, which makes conversions difficult. Converting within each system is easy due to this fact. So even though this information is found almost verbatim within our course's instructional materials, students typically will not go back through a lesson once they've reached an assignment. This is a perfect example of the white space question that students want to fill with a response. When I asked this particular student to explain their response, they could not rephrase anything at all in their own words, which means they haven't understood the concept. This is an example of a calculation-based question for measurements with multiple parts. As you can see, the student has copied directly from the website entry. In this case, I could not prove plagiarism outright because it is indeed the correct answer. Notice though that the student has not shown any calculations showing how 10,000 divided by 60 results in 166 minutes and 40 seconds. When I asked this student how they arrived at these answers, they performed the calculation on their calculator and told me that it was 166.66667 minutes. When I asked where the 40 seconds came from, the student told me it must have been a mistake and they meant to write 66 seconds. I then asked them how 166 divided by 60 resulted in 2 hours and 46 minutes. The student attempted the same thing again. When I confronted them with the possibility that they had searched their answers online, they admitted it readily and apologized, and we had a good constructive conversation about the harmful effects of plagiarizing. Here is another example of a calculation-based question. Notice the conversion ratio that the student has used here, which I've circled in red in their work above. This is not found on the Math 10C formula sheet we provide students with, nor is it found anywhere in the course instructional materials, which is a good hint as to where this answer has come from. The response would otherwise have been deemed acceptable and would have gone unaddressed had the student not shown this conversion ratio. So here I've provided a link to the script I've created for how I run all of my plagiarism phone calls with students. So I usually have to modify this script on the fly, as students do not respond the same way twice to greetings or prompts. It depends a lot on their nervousness. If they receive an email notification about their instructor requesting a phone call and start to feel guilty, this can increase their anxiety and cause different reactions to being confronted. You need to be constantly on guard about a student's well-being, and I highly recommend making notes during the course of your call for your own documentation. I always CC parents and facilitators whenever I send an email regarding these sorts of issues so that everyone is kept in the loop. So as you can see, I've included the wording I use in emails I send to students notifying that I'm pausing marking until we have a conversation. Please feel free to modify it for your own purposes. Then we move into this section. So this is my greeting for when I hear from a student. Then we move into how I outline my concerns. So I asked them, previously in the email, I asked them to have their assignment with them when they call. So when they do call, I ask them, let's look at this question. And then we're looking at, again, those two types of questions that I went over earlier. We have explanation type questions, where you're looking for a student to explain what they mean by their wording. You're looking for rephrasing, if they can change their terminology around, anything that indicates they've understood the concept. For a calculation-based question, you're looking for process, but you're asking them to explain your calculations if there's anything that's not clear. Based on how they respond, you might want to respond in one of these ways. So if they've explained their original wording or calculation, and they've expressed their understanding in a different manner, you might want to be careful about accusing of plagiarism. A lot of math solutions look very similar, and it could be just pure fluke that a student has managed to replicate an answer that's online. Just because it resembles an online answer does not mean it's been plagiarized. So if they can't successfully reword their explanation or their calculations, we might be looking at a further conversation. So in this case, you might want to say, I'm not sure you've understood this concept, and that's what concerns me. The work you've shown here indicates one thing, but you've shown difficulty explaining it, explaining what is here. And then, move into what your concerns are. Let's talk about this in a broader sense, and usually with some prompting, you can draw it out of the student. It does take some time, but if they've plagiarized and you emphasize your concern enough, they're more than likely to open up to you. So after they've opened up, this is where you want to discuss the effect on their conceptual understanding and re-emphasize your school's plagiarism policies. So in our case, I've included ADLC here, but I would modify this to include your school. You're just reiterating really what the plagiarism policies are, what the consequences are going to be, and why this is so harmful to their understanding. What happens when they come to a similar question in the future? They're not going to have understood the concept, and they're not going to know how to answer that question either. And on the final page, I've included the email template I send after I've confirmed plagiarism, and this is what I CC parents and facilitators in, so everybody is aware of the conversation that's happened. So when I send an email like this, I modify the assignment number and question number depending on where it was. I insert a link to the website that I found their response on. I insert screenshots of the student's work and a screenshot of what the website entry is and compare. It's up to you. I like to highlight similar things that indicate there is an alignment between the responses, and this will usually emphasize to students, parents, and facilitators that you're looking at this and you're noticing something's going wrong. So every student is unique, so you need to tailor your management strategy to suit each case that you address. This can be time-consuming and stressful for students, so here are some things you should think about before you decide to contact a student or not. Pick your battles. If it looks like it's been plagiarized, it doesn't always mean it's been plagiarized. You need to give the students the benefit of the doubt in most cases. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. As I said earlier, low quiz marks and exam marks give an opportunity to revisit assignments if you did have concerns, but you didn't address them with a student. You don't need to be a cop. You need to be a trustworthy instructor who has the student's best interest at heart. Don't be afraid to have a conversation, but feel comfortable addressing potential problems with students by using gentle discipline. Remember to emphasize the effect plagiarism has on a student's conceptual understanding. If they've not done their work and learned a concept, they will not be able to successfully apply their learning to similar questions in the future. This means that one incidence of plagiarism can have a detrimental effect if they've done it on repeated occasions. And finally, encourage students to ask questions as a first resort rather than relying solely on online resources. Forging a relationship is the best way to combat plagiarism. If students feel comfortable emailing or calling you when they have a question, it opens up communication channels and lets them know that math can actually be fun. I like to use Web Whiteboard or other collaboration tools such as Google Jamboard when students call or email, as it allows me to demonstrate similar problems from course materials that students can interact with me at the same time while we're talking. This is a great way to forge a relationship and have students start to feel comfortable about contacting you for help. So over the course of this year, I've continually developed the approach I take with students. The biggest tip I can give to any teacher is that if a plagiarism conversation is the first actual conversation you're having with a student, as some students will not return phone calls or emails, focus on establishing a relationship in the first few minutes of your phone call. Ask them about themselves, how they're doing with their coursework, if there's any problems they've been having, and so on, before going into the plagiarism script I showed earlier. Students will be more honest and forthcoming if you show concern for them first, rather than just concern for an assignment. So what I've noticed using my approach, I've had fewer repeat incidences. Having that conversation and giving a warning leads to fewer repeat offenders, and I've only had one student who's gone on to commit a second offense that I've had to inform my administration about. Parents are typically on your side. If you can provide proof and an understanding approach showing that you care about the student, parents will usually support you, as they want the best for their children, just like you want the best for your students. And I've also noticed increased student engagement. After I've had a conversation with a student about plagiarism, almost immediately I see a significant increase in the amount of emails I get for help or for guidance if they're not sure about something or where they can find similar examples. It's a really good way to open up those communication channels.
And to just reiterate how important building those initial relationships with students is I had one student who attempted to plagiarize almost a quarter of her course because the end of the year was approaching and she was just really rushing to get everything done. And as it's already been mentioned, Nick's process is very similar to mine. And so even though I made her resubmit all this work to prove that she understood the concepts, the student and the mom were just so appreciative of all the help I provided, and more importantly, the life lesson that I taught her. And it was because of that relationship that we initially had built. It is actually one of my greatest moments as a teacher, knowing that this particular plagiarism incident made such a difference in her life. Something that could have been such a negative experience ended up being such a positive, life-altering thing that's going to help her succeed so much further in life as she moves on to post-secondary institutes where the plagiarism consequences are so much harsher. Having her learn this lesson at an early age in high school is just going to help her so much further along as she moves in her academics.
So to summarize my approach, you need to remember that you're in a position of power that can have a dramatic impact on a student's achievement. This means that you need to be a teacher, not a judge. We're not sentencing hardened criminals. We're trying to improve student understanding, increase self-confidence, and reinforce trusting and compassionate relationships.